Today, and it's a very exciting time, so thank you for coming. Cannot hear, okay? Closer? Let's see if I can. Without pulling it off the. Yeah. Yep. It's good enough for Steve. It's good enough for you too, right? Yeah. Okay. We like it tall. Okay, how's that? Is that better? I'll also project a little bit better, so thank you. Just a quick note, we are recording this for customer service purposes to better provide you service. That's what they tell you. This is recording. Welcome this evening. This is the third community forum of the Housing Commission under the HOP grant program that we secured about 22 months ago or so, which gives us a great chance to do some very badly needed planning. So good evening to my fellow residents and to members of the Select Board, members of the Planning Board, and to our able staff of our good town who are here to help us. My name is Peter Nichols. I'm the chairman of the Housing Commission this year. We're very pleased to bring you this community forum, which is a critical planning process as we think through the conditions we have for housing and how to find the solutions. You might ask, why are we here in Whipple Hall? You may remember the first community forum that we held was in Wheeler Hall at the Colby Sawyer College, which was a great opportunity to, in an academic environment, to study the facts and figures about our town, about our demographics, about the housing condition, how many units we have, what types they are, how they're distributed. And so the second forum, we moved to the cafeteria at Colby Sawyer College in a roundtable format where we sat around and looked at some of the profiles and ideas and had very interactive sessions to talk about those concepts. Well, we're here today in Whipple Hall because ultimately this is where you vote. This is the formal place of our town, and fairly soon in March, we will be asking, the Planning Board will be asking, and the Select Board will be asking you to vote, hopefully on some of these very concepts that we're discussing tonight and on which your feedback is very helpful. So as we work together on these solutions, it's important that we meet in Whipple Hall to think very considerably and thoughtfully about the future of our town. Flip that. Sure. Just to give you an overview of the agenda, we are going to have first the Paths Home Project overview. We're going to talk about the highlights of the first and the second forum. We're going to talk about the overview of the 5 proposed regulatory changes, and then a discussion and next steps, what happens from here. I want to thank the housing team that we have been working on this over the last 22 months or so. I'm going to ask the Housing Commission members to please stand because they've been such a big help. Kathy, Amy, Randy, Tom, Marilyn. Thank you. And I certainly should mention Adam Ricker, who's been a pillar in our program and a big help to us. He's the professional. And of course, we have our consultants who've been empowered by our HOP grant, and we'll be hearing more from them, and we'll be introducing them. We're going to be covering some material today, and some of them are facts and figures and concepts on which you may have some questions. So we're going to hold Q&A till the very end on major issues. If you have a clarifying question, something's being related and you don't understand it, then please raise your hand, because sometimes the best time to get an answer is when you have the question. But keep it to clarifying questions, please. Otherwise, we won't get through the material the way we need to. We're here tonight because we heard you. You probably saw the ads. We heard you from the first and the second forum as you've been giving us a mandate that started with the master plan. It put housing as the second most important topic in town to be addressed. And we're responding to that mandate. We're also fortunate tonight to be talking about facts and not just perceptions. Perceptions are important because that's subjective. That's how things feel to you in the quality of life in town. But we also have a lot of facts tonight as reminders. We covered many of those in the first forum, but we're going to be touching on some of them as well. Next slide. The forum that we're having today is the third forum. You may remember the first one under the HOP grant was the Discovery Forum. That's where we looked at facts and figures. The second one was where we did some visioning. We looked at profiles and concepts that might make sense, and we listened in that roundtable format to your ideas and feedback as well. After the roundtable format, we had comments that came to them on note cards, et cetera. Today is the pathways and final stage where we're looking at paths to those visions as to what solutions might be available. The keys to success really are the deep study that we did, the learning that we've been doing along the way, and the community engagement, which is listening to you. And now to take us through what we've learned from you, I want to turn it over to Zach Brohinsky and then Steve Whitman of Resilience Planning and Design. Thank you.
Excuse me. Can folks hear me? Am I close enough to the mic? Wonderful. As Peter said, the first phase, the first forum of this project was the discovery phase. And so we spent a lot of time digging into the stats, the figures, crunching numbers. And at that first forum, we presented a lot of information, a lot of numbers and detail. As a result of all of that number crunching, what came out of that were some really key findings, some critical items that we wanted to bring forward to sort of synthesize all of this information. I'm going to go through each one of these in a little bit more detail. So the first of the key takeaways was this ultimately lack of diverse housing options. So most of the existing housing stock in New London are large single-family units that don't necessarily accommodate either an aging population or that attract younger homeowners, younger families. So about 90% of all housing units in town are single-family homes. Of those single-family homes, the median square footage is almost 3,000 square feet. So most of the housing is large single-family structures. So there is a significant shortage of diverse housing options, whether it's condos or townhouses, really to accommodate either those looking to downsize or to attract younger families looking to buy as a first home. The second of the key findings was something we're all probably familiar with statewide, nationally, is that home prices are on the rise. The median home sales prices have surged dramatically in New London, as they have across the state and nation, making the market increasingly competitive and out of reach for potential buyers, especially first-time home buyers. So in 2024, the median sales price of all properties in New London was $561,000. In 2012, that same number was $264,000. So over a 12-year period, the median sales price increased by 112%. So that shows pretty clearly how dramatically home prices have surged in a fairly short period of time here in New London. Vacancy rates. This is something that is a little bit more specific to New London. There's a pretty low inventory of homes for sale in town, with properties selling quickly, signaling a strong demand for housing and highlighting the limited availability of it in the area. So the number of seasonally vacant units has increased by 40% over the past decade. Represents about a third of all of New London's housing stock is vacant at least some portion of the year, which is largely driven by those seasonal vacancies. So combined with fewer properties being listed for sale, and those that are listed are on for shorter periods of time, it just again highlights the limited availability of homes for sale in the area. The aging housing stock. So much of the existing housing stock is older, with more than half of single-family homes being built pre-1980. It indicates a need for modernization, for potential redevelopment to meet the current codes and practices. So the median age of single-family homes in New London is 1978, while the median age of multi-family units is 1929. So it doesn't necessarily mean that older homes are worse, but it does often mean that they are likely to need more repairs and updates just as a result of wear and tear or outdated features. The last one, affordability challenges, something again we're probably not surprised by. It's happening across the state and the nation. There just aren't enough homes available for people with low and moderate incomes in New London, and that goes for homeowners and renters as well. Excuse me. So with the median value of a single-family home in New London, as I said earlier, at $619,000, that requires a household income of nearly $140,000 to purchase a home with a down payment of 20%. So when we then look at different jobs and earning potential in New London, occupations like whether it's education or healthcare, business management, food prep, these numbers are just unattainable for homeowners. The same is true for renters as well. And so again, this speaks to the need for more diverse and affordable housing options that really meets the needs of residents living and working in New London. And so when it comes to the feedback we received from residents at that first forum, we got a lot of really important feedback. There were some concerns related to water and sewer capacity as well as the design of any new construction. People want to make sure that any new developments or redevelopments fit within New London's character and feel. People do still feel that there is a lot of opportunity for future home construction, and that homes for employees and families and seniors really adds to the community's vibrancy. Also, attendees felt that there really needs to be more opportunity for alternative housing in New London that's affordable. And interestingly enough, more than a quarter of the participants that attended were in fact interested in a smaller home than what they are currently in. So just some feedback, some stats about that first forum, and I think I'm passing it back to Steve.
I just want to keep going.
I'll pass it on to you.
All right, don't get too depressed. That was a lot of heavy stuff. Okay, so show of hands, who was at the first forum? Just, oh, aha, a lot of you. Who made it also to the second forum? So quite a few of you. That's great, thank you. It's nice to have some people who've been along for the ride with us. We wanted to highlight a couple things from the second forum, and two of the primary things we wanted to touch on were this, that 91% of the people that were participating in the second forum were year-round residents. So a real high percentage of folks who are here year-round and who have been here for more than 10 years. 60% of those folks have been here for a long time. You might remember from Forum 2 that we got into a much more focused approach to everything. So we took all the big ideas and the data from Forum 1. We looked at a variety of different strategies. So we looked at 4 potential zoning district changes, and we looked at 7 potential new regulatory strategies, and we gave you a crash course in them, right? So we had you read about them very quickly and sit down and kind of hash out pros and cons for them. And we kind of looked across the groups when you reported out and in all the notes that were taken to kind of see where thoughts aligned, where there were things that seemed like they might have an option here. They could be a strategy worth pursuing more, and where there were things that people were just not warming up to. So the forum feedback really, from Forum 2, drove a lot of the work that the commission's been doing since, wouldn't you say? Yeah, absolutely. So it's really, really important. And also the forum feedback helped show some things that people were maybe open to, but didn't see as like a near-term strategy. It might take a lot more dialogue. I mean, obviously, tonight's not the last night these things are being talked about. Whatever the planning board decides to carry forward will go through public hearings. You all have a chance to vote on these things. You can decide collectively if you want to support them or not. But these steps along the way have been really, really important. Okay, so getting to the reason we're here tonight, before we go through these kind of 5 areas, I wanted to point out you know, the Housing Commission's at this point, and we'll talk about this with next steps, where they've kind of done what they can do. And really, the planning board members are here tonight. Planning board members have been engaged all along. At some point, these materials have to be presented to the planning board and worked through some sessions with the planning board, which have been scheduled. And ultimately, the planning board has to decide what they think is palatable, what can be brought forward, what needs the most attention, maybe what's too much or not enough, and all of that. So we're hoping this work will inform that. We've touched on a lot of things like housing price. I'm sure questions about infrastructure and stuff will come up tonight. The scope of what the Housing Commission and the Planning Board can do, if you picture a pie chart, you know, there's some narrow pieces of pie that they can actually focus on. And the regulations is one of the many things. Attracting a developer, getting the funding together, financing together for projects. Like, there are a lot of other pieces of the pie that are just beyond the scope of what the Housing Commission can do, and a lot of our conversations went back to that. So I just want to point that out. Another thing that's outside of the scope of the Planning Board and the Housing Commission is what the state decides to do. So I don't have accessory dwelling units up there just to irritate you, because I know what the conversations have been in the past. But because, to some degree, planning boards across New Hampshire have had their hand forced to deal with this based on a July 2025 law change. So we're going to bring it forward. Ultimately, it's up to the planning board and other planning boards around the state what they decide to do to be in compliance with the state law. But the Housing Commission felt they should at least do their due diligence of talking about it and bringing it forward here tonight. So we'll touch on that. The other four should sound familiar if you were at forum number 2: cottage courts, institutional zone, home conversions, and cluster subdivisions. These are the ones that kind of made it through all the meetings that have happened since the spring. And we'll touch on each of them. We'll kind of give you a little bit of an overview. And then I will pause, and Amy, our capable microphone professional, will help come around if you have a clarifying question. We'll try to spend like 5 minutes or less on clarifying questions, but they may be important to helping you understand and others understand any issue related to the tool. And then when we get to the end, we'll take any questions that you have. So, anything you want to add yet?
No, that's terrific. Thank you.
All right. These guys have been encouraged to throw things in as they have additional comments to make it more interesting for you. All right, so accessory dwelling units. This may be a little bit of a reminder for some of you that have been through this before, but with the recent state law change, this is now back in front of us. You might remember from forum number 2, the profile sheet. All the materials and the feedback received from the first 2 forums is on the website, the project website, Paths Home, so you can still go there and look at that if you have questions. So we put these out to kind of give a broad overview. Since that time, in the law change, what we've done is come back. We've actually gone through the town's existing ADU regulation. And what would need to change is that under state law, you have to now, by right, allow 1 attached or detached unit. There are also some size changes that have happened, but this has to be allowed in all zoning districts that permit single-family homes. And so this is an issue that towns are starting to wrap their heads around across New Hampshire. So that allowing 1 attached or detached is one thing, and then a maximum of 1 parking space per unit. So those are the things we're focused on so far, just what the law requires. Clarifying questions. Let's make Amy move around the room. Yes, wait, you can't have a question.
I'm thinking that perhaps people don't know what by right means necessarily, so
Please.
explaining that would be, so formerly the attached accessory dwelling units were allowed by conditional use permit, and so that process went through the planning board much like a site plan review did. By right means that you have to approve it through a building permit process, so there is no planning board process associated with an accessory dwelling unit anymore.
Yeah, and I would just quickly add to that, as part of the process with filing a building permit, there's a requirement that you have adequate septic system support or sewage support, and of course it has to meet fire code, and if it needs egress, it has to have egress, all those things. But essentially, this law, which is retroactive, it's in effect right now. It says that the town has to approve a building permit application as long as it meets those standards, either an attached or an internal attached accessory dwelling unit.
No Questions? All right. Okay, that's fine. All right, so hearing none, and they can come up later too.
Yeah, excuse me, if folks have questions,
Thank you.
there are note cards up here. Feel free at any point, come up. If the thought pops into your head, come up, scratch it down, save it, drop it in the box, pass it up here. So there's that option as well.
Thanks, Zach. I forgot to mention the note cards. So the note cards are there. Also, if you have things you want to share, comments or questions that you just don't want to take time tonight, or you just want to let us know how you feel. And so that basket, fill it if you can. The more information, the better. So thank you. All right, so cottage courts. This was a concept that was popular with a lot of groups at the second forum. It was new, I think, to a lot of folks. Some folks had examples from other places where they'd seen this kind of smaller, higher density but small number of small units kind of clustered together. It's been appealing to a lot of folks for a variety of reasons. Kind of back to what Zach was sharing. Folks who want to age in the community and are empty nesters or want to downsize or living alone, as well as folks that want to maybe own something, because these can be both owner-occupied or rentals, depending on how they're developed. So this one has continued to chug through the process. You might remember the cottage court profile sheet from before. One of the things that I think people like about this is even though they're small, they're somewhat scalable. If you've been following news in Lebanon, they're building a cottage court. The city's building a cottage court of 5 units. It's going to be for city employees because they need housing. In Bedford, we just saw plans for one that's about 16 units with it's kind of a communal building in the development. We're working with the town of Meredith. They're looking at adopting a provision like this. We're working with a couple other communities that are also so they're gaining in popularity. We don't have a ton of examples of them in the state, and that was one of the things we were talking about with the commission as we went through this. And we have actually crafted a model ordinance for the planning board's consideration. At the work sessions, we'll go through that with them, and they can decide if they want to carry it forward, if they want to make changes. But the one that we're looking at right now has development of 8 to 12 residential units. All the doors for the cottages, the ordinance would require that they are all fronting on this kind of shared common space. So it has that pedestrian feel, that they have shared buffered parking. In some cases, you have topography, and we looked at examples where you could have parking underneath if that was the case. So there's some flexibility in how these can be designed as well. But the fact that you can either mix in different rental prices based on the size of the unit, or you can have home ownership, condoed home ownership options, has been appealing to folks. They're nice too because people are electing to do them, so you can have design standards. We can't require design of accessory dwelling unit because we can't require design of a single family home, but you could require design for these. And so they have really well thought out design standards within them. So some of the specifics for this ordinance, we're looking at 10 units an acre of net developable area, max of 1.5 stories, so picture like a Cape type cottage. Some communities are bumping that up to 2 stories, and generally 1,000 square feet on the first floor and about half that in the second floor, so about 1,500 square feet total, with requirements for both public-facing porches and private sitting areas, kind of where you can have your barbecue type of thing. And we're looking at a max of maybe 12 units per cluster, the potential to do more than one cluster of cottages. So if there was a bigger lot and you wanted to set them up, that would be a possibility in the future. Before I go to questions, anything else? Looks like you have something you want to add. Oh, you did? All right, Amy, we have a hand about to go up. There's a hand going up. We have not. We do need a microphone because it's being recorded.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so if you're looking at 1,500 square feet and you're anywhere from $250 to $300 a square foot, you're talking still a lot of change. Okay,
Yes.
so I don't know how this becomes affordable unless somehow subsidies are coming into play, and does that mean new lenders now become a landlord?
No, it doesn't mean that at all. So there are 2 separate ways this could go, right? This could be market rate units that are just going to provide units for some of the folks that could
Right.
afford to be there, as Zach talked about.
Or you just put a percentage of them as affordable and the rest
But-
are market rate?
Exactly. You have the ability to do
Right. So you're
workforce housing.
subsidizing them one way or the other?
Well, there's the potential for someone like a Twin Pines, if they wanted to do something like this. I don't think they have any cottage courts within their portfolio. currently. I haven't seen any.
They have some detached and semi-detached, but no cottage.
Okay, so there's a potential for a developer that could leverage those additional funds to make some of the units affordable, more affordable, yes. We haven't created a pro forma for it. The planning board and the housing commission's only requirement is to create the opportunity. So they may be,
I think if you're only giving us half the story then. You really
tell
need,
me more.
because if the whole purpose of this is to attract people to come back, we don't even need to attract people to come into London. They want to come, period.
Sure.
So if they want to live here, and the whole premise of this was that the current housing stock is unaffordable. So if you're now going to create additional housing stock that once again is unaffordable,
Let's
How does
table,
that solve that?
we're beyond a clarifying question now, and we're
True,
into a debate
true.
on housing
sorry.
pricing, but
That's
no.
why I said I had a whole bunch. Okay.
No, I think that's fair, and I think what I will say, let's put a pin in that and make sure it comes up at the end. Unless you're requiring it to be workforce housing, which I don't believe the town wants to do, there's already an incentive there to do something if people want, but you can't require the developer to do it. So right now, we're just trying to create the form of housing for each of these as a possibility, and then beyond that, the affordability is the second piece. But did you have anything you want to add before we move on? Okay. Any other clarifying questions on cottage courts? Please. Amy.
Yes. Who exactly are you envisioning moving into these cottage courts? What's the demographic? Because you just said, I think 70% of the room is retired. Are you envisioning the folks here moving into these cottage courts?
It's not for me to determine who was in.
I'm
I
just,
see some heads
I'm just,
shaking.
it's interesting seeing this, and I'm wondering.
Says young families and downsizing seniors.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, but they'd be open to anybody. Yep. Jerry Coogan in the back. Thank you, Steve. No problem.
So at 10 units per acre, that's pretty dense. And is it fair to assume that public sewer and public water would be required?
Not necessarily. The one in Lebanon is on public water and sewer. Some of the others that have been proposed aren't. And then you also have stormwater as well. So like in Lebanon's case, it's 5 units, but it's on 2 acres. So you're going to have a maximum of 12 in a cottage court. If it's 10 units per acre, it doesn't mean that they can't be on a bigger parcel and have a shared well and septic. So, but yeah, these are all things that would have to be dealt with before going before the planning board. All right, anything else on cottage courts? Okay. All right, so the next one, institutional zone. Before I get into this, do you want me to get into this first before you share anything you want to share? Or?
Sure, I'll do it afterwards.
Okay, that's fine. So you might remember this from last time. What's interesting with the institutional zone is, we're talking about the 2 parts of the institutional zone that deal with the college and the hospital. So 2 of your biggest employers, 2 employers that have real housing needs, their employees do. And Peter will touch on that in a minute. So we talked about this because of the location of the institutional zone close to the core of the community. You remember this sheet from that time. What we're looking at now for this is that these districts are fairly small in comparison to your other zoning districts, so they don't hold a lot of opportunity, but they hold some. And so there's a potential to accommodate some multifamily housing here. It would only take minor changes to the existing zoning districts to allow multifamily housing to be developed there. And the ordinance details include allowing multifamily housing, potentially increasing the height of the multifamily housing. We talked quite a bit for the colleges alone about the fact that there are some taller buildings there. It could be quite fitting. So increasing unit types and density for the institutional uses. Also allowing garden style or townhome designs in the college institutional district. And potentially expanding the hospital institutional district slightly for compatible housing. So those were some of the things we've been focused on. What do you have to share?
I did some outreach to the hospital and the college just to find out what their employment situations were. And the hospital replied that they have 32 full-time employment opportunities available, 32 openings, 3 part-time. and that their average salary, average hourly wage is $38 an hour. So if you figure that on an annual basis, that's about $72,000, $75,000 a year. Still can't afford to live in New London. The college, the data wasn't quite clear because I'm not sure it included the whole college, including the professors, but they had 8 openings. And I was advised that as to the housing occupancy, they are absolutely full, including 15 occupants in dormitories. I think that refers to one of the dormitories that was converted for professors. And so they're full. They could use more housing badly. So that's real data as of today.
Clarifying questions on institutional change in the back. I see a hand.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. My clarifying question is, it notes students here in addition to staff. Is this saying that students can afford this type of housing if this type of zoning went forward?
It's not saying that. Do you remember our comment? It does say students here. I mean, they could build
I don't
additional
know
student
if
housing, which they're not
college
likely to do.
students could afford any housing, but
Right.
I
That's
just wanted to
not the
clarify.
primary focus, but I don't see what, I
Thank
don't think
you.
you would eliminate the college from building additional student housing if they had a need. They can already do that now.
Yeah, that would be a dormitory, right?
But that's a good question.
And I think it could be a diversity of style of student housing, dorm versus a more similar to an apartment suite or something like that that they may be interested in.
Yeah.
Could you please clarify what garden style is?
Yeah, actually, garden style is the picture. Actually, both of these are garden style apartments. So often they have main entrances and then have like a central corridor that apartments come off. They can be configured kind of differently beyond that, but versus townhouses, which often are one unit with a shared wall next to another unit. So we talked about both. Yep. Other clarifying questions? We've got a question down front.
Thank you for taking the question. I guess this relates to the cottage as well as the institutional zone. Is the idea that it would be bonus in some way if it were restricted to employees or someone that had a relationship to that? And for example, with workforce housing, if the number per acre, does that change if people make commitments to that?
So I think it would have to enact the workforce housing ordinance to do that, but they could do both together, right?
And Paul, I would say that, nothing is set in stone yet or written, and so if you think that is, a good idea to be included in the institutional, I think that's what we're looking to hear.
Yes, in the back.
Could I just ask that in this scenario, would you envision that shared septic and shared wells would work?
I would ask you. No, I think in this location, you're closer to water and sewer potential, right? And so if the capacity was there, I would guess that's how they would want to go. I think both institutions are on water.
And with sewer, there's a state law that if your development is within so many feet of the sewer system, they're actually required to connect to the sewer system. So they both being served would have to be on town sewer.
Yeah, and so for what the Housing Commission and the Planning Board can do is create the regulation. If the opportunity doesn't exist for all the pieces to come together, there may not be any takers for a while, but at some point if infrastructure issues get worked out, then it would be possible. Yeah, no, it's a good question, yeah. All right, you ready for the last one? And then we'll go to the wild card open question round. So the last one is second to last, home conversions. So home conversions, we have these nice pictures from Forum 2 showing larger buildings. We talked a little bit, Zach mentioned kind of the median size of homes here in New London. They are bigger than a lot of the New Hampshire communities we work with. And fortunately, they're, under state law, you can take a single-family home, if allowed in the zoning, and make it up to 4 units without having to sprinkle it. So once you start sprinkling a building and making those other building code changes, it gets pretty expensive. But so our conversation has been around allowing for home conversion from a single family to a multifamily up to 4 units. And the details of that would be there would be no sprinkling required initially. It's a way of increasing housing. It could be rental. It could be broken up into condos. So there are different options there. It doesn't guarantee that it'll be workforce housing or at a specific price point, but it's more likely that there will be opportunity if people wanted to do that. The ordinance details, we've talked about doing this through a conditional use permit, if in the R1, R2, ARR districts, and limiting it to buildings that are more than 50 years old. We started talking about a specific year, and then we decided it should just be 50 years and let it travel through time, and we'll see if the planning board agrees, and larger than 2,000 square feet. So then a couple of Main Street examples that the Housing Commission wanted to include were the old hospital and the Blue Building. Anything you want to add to either of those?
Yeah, I would just stress, we have a volume, a square footage opportunity. We need housing for starter homes and young families who don't need large houses, and we need smaller units for downsizing seniors. So if we have seniors that move out of big homes, then we have an opportunity to make that into multiple homes of smaller size for young families. Or for downsizing seniors in a multi-unit building. Of course, I will stress, older houses made of wood, they would burn fast. And so we need fire egress, we need protection, we need security, we need identity, they need front doors, they need comfort and all the amenities, toilets and kitchens, et cetera. But it's a very exciting opportunity of utilizing that raw square footage of these big homes to be made into multiple units. And they could be condos, could be rentals, or what have you.
Questions, clarifying questions on conversions? All right, now we'll move to the last one. So for the last one tonight, we have cluster. So cluster subdivisions, this image here shows a conventional subdivision in the middle, where you take the whole lot, and as you carve it up into individual lots, like a lot of the neighborhoods many of us live in. So everyone has kind of the same size lot, and you kind of max out the parcel to get the number of residential units you can. Cluster subdivision, something you already have here on the books, and we'll show some examples. Some of you may live in some of these neighborhoods, but you already have this as a provision. It hasn't been used a lot, but it's been used, I would say, more here than in some surrounding communities. And so we've talked about just refining it, just trying to keep it alive, keep it an option for folks. So the things that we've talked about changing related to cluster that we want to talk with the planning board about, we want to share with all of you tonight, is the nice thing about it is we heard a lot about the character of the community. So as housing units are added, people are concerned about the character of the community. It's a community that's done really well with land conservation, is very environmentally aware. And so thinking about developing on appropriate portions of a lot and protecting other portions, this is very much in line with that. So we're talking about potentially removing the acreage minimum for having a cluster project, having some additional design guidelines in there, and some bonuses. And so there could be a bonus for something like workforce housing. If you wanted to include a couple of units within it, maybe you get a little bit more density. There are lots of ways cluster subdivisions have been set up in New Hampshire. The more we dig into yours, the more we see opportunities either to tweak it or to start fresh. And so that's one of the conversations we'd like to have with the planning board, because we can show a couple other models. We've had some conversations about yield plans, for instance, like where a developer can come in and actually, without getting too deep into the design process, can show what they would do and how many units they would get as a baseline density, and then go through the process following your cluster and actually show a revised approach that's much more thoughtful in the way the density is arranged and what land is left behind, and then how you would calculate bonuses for either a higher percentage of land that's protected or for workforce housing units or whatever was most important here in the community. I'm just going to go through these. Can I just go through the examples quick?
Yeah, sure.
All right, so these are some photos that Peter was nice enough to go out and take today. He had to drive around with his camera.
I had to do that.
Don't feel too bad for him. But so he drove around and looked at Great Pines. Anyone here live there? All right, congratulations. It's very nice.
Nice community.
And Adam pulled this, and I thought what was helpful about this is from the tax map. And so you can see how in this case, all the lots are arranged in the middle, and then the open space pretty much surrounds it, right, Adam? Like this is the balance of the land protected. One of the things we talked about in our meeting this morning was that when you drive by a neighborhood like this, you might see the road going in, you might see the sign and see a house. If you drive in, sometimes we hear, wow, the houses are really close together, because we lose track of the fact that all this open space has been set aside. So this is one.
And just go back one.
Yeah, please.
Just to clarify a little bit. One
Yep.
more, yeah. The top right photograph was just to show that's a shared driveway between those two houses. And that's pretty clever. It's an efficient use of less asphalt. It's hard to show in the photograph because it was the wrong angle. And I didn't want to walk on people's property to take pictures of their houses. But it shows a clever design. They're independent. They have doors facing different directions. And from what I could see, they got along very nicely.
All right, next one, Fenwood. So Fenwood, I think this has come up at other meetings. People are familiar with Fenwood. This is what it looks like from the air. So there is, forget, you can't see that one. There is a planned unit development portion up front, Adam, right, on 7? In the rear. And then in the front is the cluster. And I'm hitting too many buttons. So once again, you can get a sense for the open space that's protected around it, which you might not notice if you're there, either live there or you're visiting there. And then the last one is Snowcrest. So again, buffering, kind of hiding the houses, the entrance, you don't really get a sense of what's there. And then when you look at it from a bird's eye view, you actually see the land that's protected around it, and you can see the neighborhood, how it's clustered here, kind of a distance in from the main road.
Snowcrest is also, it's called West Side Drive.
Yes.
It's just,
Yeah.
Snowcrest is the name of the development.
And this is the intersection with 89 right here?
Yes.
Just to the,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so just past 89 from here. Clarifying questions about clusters. Yeah, please. Amy, we have a question.
In these types of situations, do people actually own the house?
Yes.
So they actually have rights to their property and they can develop it. Do they have any egress limitations? Because you're saying the shared driveway.
So
It would
most of these
depend on the design.
developments have an overarching homeowners association. So in addition to any regulations that the town has, their homeowners association has their own regulations that they may not be able to have sheds or, various different things that they've decided on their own.
Yep. Other questions on cluster?
Just to sort of to speak to the water and sewer aspect of these, it's different development to development. Some of them are on public utilities. Snowcrest, they have individual wells with a community sewer system, which is also the case in Todd Farm on King Hill, which is a even slightly different cluster where they're very large lots and pretty large homes, and there's only a cluster of 5 of them. But so there's a mix of shared systems and municipal systems.
Yeah.
This may be a question for Adam. With the new ADU law, how does that relate to the lots that are created in clusters and in other ways?
So from the zoning perspective, it wouldn't have any difference in how we treat them. They're single-family homes. From the community's perspective, a lot of cluster subdivisions or any sort of, even if it's not a cluster, but a subdivision that has a HOA with regulations, a lot of times they don't allow accessory dwelling units. And so that's an agreement that that person buying that house with that deed restriction is buying into that we don't have control over, but from a zoning perspective, if it's a single-family home, we have to allow it. There may be limitations that being on a small lot with the sewer capacity where they actually don't have the feasible land to expand their septic system if they have an individual septic that could limit their opportunities just by being on a smaller lot, but they would technically be allowed an ADU.
And Adam, there would be other constraints that apply, such as for new construction, which would be setbacks, site coverage ratio, height limits, of course, and
Correct.
other constraints.
Yep, and there actually is one house in Snowcrest, all the way up in the back, that converted a large family room over their garage into a studio apartment.
All right. Any other clarifying questions on cluster? Hearing none. We've taken 45 minutes of your day, so we're going to go to this part before we open it up to discussion. So remember, there are cards up here too if you want to keep your notes or write things down. As far as next steps, so the Housing Commission has kind of concluded their work as far as I'm aware of their solo work. They've reached out to the planning board and they're going to be having a couple of work sessions over the coming month with them to go through these and look at actual track change versions of these and start digging into additional questions planning board members have. And so that work's underway. We will then report back. We will, the planning board will, both will. I'll let you talk to that. But there'll be an opportunity to kind of continue to tell you what's happening. And then ultimately at some point, something could get carried forward to town meeting 2026. So there would be public hearings that would start in January. So they have between now and January to kind of decide what they want to bring forward and what specifics they want to leave within there. And then there would be public hearings starting at the beginning of the year. And if anything goes to town meeting, you then be hearing about it and then have an opportunity to vote in March. So as far as next steps, I think that's it that we wanted to cover, right?
That's right. Just as a reminder, the Housing Commission really has no formal authority for making zoning change. We're simply advisory to the Planning Board and the Select Board. Our job is to be as smart and informed as we can about housing and to bring that forth to the Planning Board and the Select Board, who will adopt some or none of it, and then we'll bring it to you for a vote.
So for the next portion of the evening, do you want to stand here or do you want me to stand here?
You're doing fine so far.
Oh, I get to keep standing?
Yeah.
Good, all right. All right, so remember, Amy has a microphone. We do want to hear your voices so that those that watch the recording can benefit from your questions. So any questions? Yeah.
And if you could just state your name so that the recording secretary can.
Chris Menzel, and I'm curious what percent of the housing stock is utilized for weekly rentals, something like VRBOs or that kind of thing?
Do you remember, Zach? Or Adam, do you have a sense?
Ultimately, the question is that a big number or a little number? Is that something that could,
Yeah.
by adjusting the rules around that, you could actually change substantially the number of available housing?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. With Mark Fougier, one of the consultants we had, who's actually on this team but couldn't be here tonight, but was also a prior consultant, he dug deep on that, looking for data, and we came up with two numbers. One was 30 units, and the other one was 13. And it's very hard to get that information because the Airbnbs and VRBOs, they now bury that, so you can't scan it. But they were just in the process of making it obscure, and those are the two numbers they came up with, 2 tries. So
And I think what we saw is one of the ways it became obscure is you used to be able to find it for New London specifically, and now it can be blended with Springfield and other communities, so it shows a bigger area. But that's a relatively small number compared to what we're seeing in other communities.
It's also somewhat misleading because Peter Christians and the Maplewood advertise on Airbnb for their rooms, and so there's not an easy way to query out those versus traditional homes.
I guess sorry, Zach, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the bottom line is we don't have the kind of tourism town problems that, for example, Sunapee does with the ski area. And it's a nice town, and we love it, and we have the lake and a good quality of life here, but we don't have the raw tourism pressure. Sorry, Zach.
Is it reasonable to point back to the RKG analysis if anyone has
Yeah.
more of a detailed question, the market research analysis is, I assume,
would be in the
available.
housing needs assessment. So the housing needs
Oh, okay.
assessment on the paths home does have the number and does point to the air DNA and any other source. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's right.
We have a question over here. You're gonna get your steps in, Amy.
So my name is Lindsay Williams. I'm here primarily because my parents have retired up here. So I don't know if maybe I add a perspective to those young people and young families looking to move in. And I know if there are low or mid-income people, the goal is probably to have a place where they can be and start a family. I'm not sure if a condo would be high on my list. So I do like the sound of like clusters, but I'm not sure I'd want to spend like $400 a month to an HOA. So if there was a way to kind of marry the clusters with maybe actually owning the property and obviously following all the other rules regarding development, that would probably be the marriage I would suggest.
Thanks, John Elliott. I'm young, I guess. But I don't feel young. I just kind of want to echo those sentiments, which is if you are a young family, which I was when I moved here when I was 30-ish, the reason that I was attracted to the area is it's rural, and I wanted a single family home with, some sense of like I want to look out the window and see some woods.
Yeah.
The total opposite of that would be what's been shown on these slides. I do resonate with the last one, which showed what's already existing here, which are those little communities with some rural conservation around it. I'd be interested to know how many of those are young families versus retirees, which I understand the retirees in the room that want to downsize. I'd love to upsize, so one of you sell me your house. But
You may have come to the right
half
place.
joking, half kidding. But yeah, I think it's interesting when you think about young people moving here. They're attracted for the rural aspect of our town, and I don't think luring them in with multifamily housing is the way to go at all. In fact, I think that's the wrong type of people that I would want to move in, which would be transient in nature with low community ties, not settling down roots whatsoever. That's the kind of thing that if it were in this town, I might not have chosen it, to be honest with you.
So one of the things I've often asked at these meetings, and sometimes it's just Zach and I that raise our hands, but like who lived in an ADU? Who's lived in multifamily? A lot of us need that at one point, maybe before we're partnered up or while we're just getting started. And so for one, you have to allow multifamily in part of your community according to state law. So this continues to make sure that New London's in good keeping with the state law, which you're in good shape. The other part is it might not be a lot of units. You might get one project. You might not even get one project for each of these tools, but that's just a handful of more units that help diversify beyond the 90% of single family. And the 90% single family, especially bigger homes, anyone who can afford those is going to have plenty of options to see that. It's everybody else who has basically zero options.
Yeah, and I would quickly add to that, we have to look at housing size as a spectrum in a person's life. When you're not married or you're young and you move to an area, it's just you living there. And then maybe you develop a significant other and that maybe the two of you can live there. And then eventually you may have some children and then you need something bigger. So it's a spectrum of what's affordable and what's needed. But so we say younger people need starter homes. And eventually they can afford a bigger home or a home with a view or, out in the ARR zone where it's 4-acre zoning. But we want to provide the spectrum of housing for young families.
One point that I just want to make to Mary, a comment that you made earlier with yours too, is I think sometimes we get lost in the affordable housing conversation, realizing that it's also a diversity in housing stock. And so while, the cottage courts may not be the most affordable units when they come to market, they provide that alternative for somebody who is going to give up their larger home that perhaps you can then buy, and you give up the smaller home, and then the property ladder sort of changes, where neither of you may need to rely on a subsidized unit. There's just simply nowhere for somebody to go to sort of break that chain in the property ladder.
Can I?
I just want to follow up on that. And while you were speaking, I just thought of this. Has anybody done a survey as to find out where the open land is that all this can be built on?
Yes, and you have plenty.
Where?
So we did that early on in the process. We actually brought to the Housing Commission a series of maps. Zach could pull those maps up.
Is it on the path? Because I was on the path site this morning.
No, the maps aren't necessarily, we had some maps in the first forum, do you recall?
It's embedded in the forum videos.
Yes.
In the videos
The first
themselves?
forum.
On the first one? Because I was at the first one.
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing actual vacant land that's available for development with water and sewer.
Doesn't have to have water and sewer. You can do a well and septic.
Yeah, but you can't do it for multifamily.
You can actually. And it's being done in a lot of parts of New Hampshire.
Really?
We're not talking about a lot of projects here, but you can do it. We're not
Can you
saying
just
need
give
to
me one
create a lot of
example so I can go research it?
One example of a multifamily that's on water and sewer.
With shared water and septic system.
I can't off the top of my head, but if you give us your contact information, we definitely can.
And so Snowcrest is a good example where it's not multifamily necessarily, but it's still a shared community sewer system. And so whether it's 10 units of single family or 10 units of multifamily, they still have the ability to use essentially the same system, although likely for 10 units of multifamily, they actually need a smaller community septic system because in New Hampshire, septics are sized by bedrooms, and so typically the larger houses have more bedrooms. So it's not exactly apples to apples on the housing style, but the technology is the same as far as accommodating a community sewer system.
I'd be curious to see how that system actually works.
Yep.
And there are a lot of communities that have less water and sewer options than you do in New Hampshire, that have multifamily and have commercial. Stratham's one example. They're right next to Exeter. They have a lot of development, and it's all well and septic.
And on Pleasant Lake, if you're familiar with the Slope and Shore community, they have a community water system. And there's how many houses, Peter? 70. 70 houses connected to their water system, so which helps in the lot sizing because obviously there's a certain radius between your well and your septic that has to be maintained. So if you have community water, you don't have to worry about that radius when you're siting your septic.
I wanted to follow up because someone of my generation, I'm just going to say a young person, there's a reality that the increasing in wages isn't going to make us competitive to the point where we may never be able to buy a $1.2 million home. So I'm not sure why we shouldn't be building nice, smaller homes that people can literally just buy. So that's why I'm thinking there should be a marriage because otherwise I wouldn't be on I don't want to live in a condo when I'm retiring.
So it's currently legal to build a small home on an individual lot. You just need to do it yourself or find a builder who will do it. And most builders are finding it, they don't want to do that. So I think people of, I would like to say our generation, but your generation and my generation, people are increasingly saying that. Like they'd like to be able to buy a ranch or some of the nice smaller homes here in town on some of the neighborhoods, but there aren't a lot of builders out doing that. The cluster cottage court gives you some density where it might tempt a builder to do it, but aside from building your own home or finding a developer or maybe cultivating a developer in the town, yeah. Do you have a follow-up?
So I guess the issue is that you can't find a developer that would, I'm going to say, build the classic developments of like the 19 whatever, when they would just build the same style home down a street, for instance. They just don't do that anymore.
Well, they do it. Brady Sullivan's doing it in Lebanon and in Laconia, but they're finding it so profitable, they're renting them.
Ooh, they're not actually selling them. Now, I don't know if there's a regulatory capacity to sort of, okay.
No.
I'm just floating it.
Yeah, no, but you're onto something for sure.
Let me also quickly clarify the notion of a condominium. When everybody hears the term condominium, sometimes they think of a multi-story building with units on different floors. And when you're dealing with subdivisions, which are done in a condominium, it allows you, if you want to buy one, to own the land underneath your building and a certain amount of land around your building. And then the rest of it is owned or managed by the HOA. So a condo, even on a single family or a townhome, can be a very efficient way of designing ownership, but still having vistas around it. In fact, as a retired developer, once upon a time, I was looking at buying a golf course and doing a cluster development and turning the perimeter into an equestrian center. and it didn't work out. But there's a good use for it because horses sleep at night, and it's vast. There's a problem with manure, but that can work. Anyway, is there a question back?
We've got
Hi,
a
can
question
you-
in the back.
Yes, question in the back. My name is Brenda Montagna, and I live on West Side Drive in the cluster housing. So for the gentleman in the front, my house is up for sale. Come see me after. But no, my question is, have other studies been done in Springfield, Wilmot, or other towns that are in this district as represented by our school system? And what would the results of those same assessments be that Paths to Home has completed? And my other comment is, in regards to a shared sewer system, there are a lot of considerations to that. We experience it at West Side Drive. We do have individual leaching fields, but we have a common area that we maintain collectively. So it's a little bit unique and not exactly straightforward for cottage-style type housing. But if other studies have been done in surrounding towns, I think that would also be helpful for the town of New London to hear those assessments. Results.
I can take a stab at that a little bit. So obviously, local control and local decision on how to tackle issues is very important. So every town is doing it a little bit different. I can't say that I'm familiar with what every town is doing, but I know that Wilmot and Sutton have both spent a pretty considerable amount of time working on housing. There was the last grant round that we were involved in was called the Housing Navigator Grant, which set us up to obtain this Housing Opportunities Grant. And there were several towns in the Kearsarge Valley region that were a part of that Navigator Grant, and everybody got access to the same employee from the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission. Sunapee originally started in the project and had to drop out partway due to staffing capacity in their own office. Wilmot, Newbury,
Yep.
and Sutton? No, Sutton's outside of the RPCs. There's a handful of towns working together, and then above all of the towns, you have the work of the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission going on at the regional level. And so planning commissions are, their regions are defined at the state level, and they are required by law to do a housing needs assessment periodically. And so they just updated the wider regions assessment in 2021 to identify what the basic need is in each community.
Yeah, this is Steve Allenby. Adam, this is probably for you, but do you know what the distance is from the continuum property or from the dry cleaner where the contamination is? Has the DES told you or anyone how far from that someone's allowed to drill a well and use the water?
No.
And do we know when they're going to tell us that?
No, unless the selectmen know something different, but.
Okay. Because I think that's a lot of the land that's available. And I've heard Ken Jakes a lot, and I understand that New London is on the top of a rock. So just getting water wherever you want to go and get water in New London, I think, is difficult, and it's not an easy lift. So, and we don't know where, where the no drilling, no well zone is even in New London, right? I mean, can you go a mile away? Can you go half a mile away? We don't have a clue, do we?
I don't think that it's defined by a specific radius. Obviously, there's geological technicalities of the water, and I don't believe DES has definitively said in any capacity exactly where it could or where it couldn't.
Yeah, because when we've asked about the geology, we've been told it's very expensive to determine it because a lot of the houses in the area are already on the system, so there's no well data or anything like that. So I think if people could put pressure on the DES to try to figure out the geology and try to figure out where they're going to prevent people from drilling wells, that would be great.
There was a question over here. She's had her hand up for quite a while.
Yes, I'm Carol Foss, And I just have more of a comment that we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 pretty major water bodies in this community, and at least 2 of them have had serious cyanobacteria, mainly Pleasant Lake, which had a lake-wide cyanobacteria outbreak about, a month ago, 3 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. More development is more stormwater runoff. We have a warming climate bringing more rain events, creating even more stormwater runoff, and we have to be really careful when we start more development to make sure that best practices are used when those developments go in to control that stormwater runoff, because some of these lakes may be at the tipping point, and we do not want to kill the goose that lays the golden egg.
Thank you for that.
And just for clarification, as far as any new development goes, it's both in our subdivision regs and in state law that pre and post development stormwater calculations must be equal or better. So new houses that go in have to put stormwater, whether you're on the lakes or not. You can't just send your stormwater to your neighbor and make it their problem. And so I think oftentimes it's important for us to look at our own houses that have been there for many years and maybe didn't have stormwater management techniques put in place when they were built. Most of the new construction has its stormwater taken care of. It's a difficult thing, obviously, because there's a lot, even maintenance of stormwater management systems. The homeowners really have to take responsibility and keep the systems maintained and gutters cleaned out so that there's not debris going into the sumps and clogging things. And every once in a while, the stone has to be taken out because the fines make it in there. And so it is, I mean, it takes a knowledgeable homeowner to make sure that they're maintaining their systems too.
All right, so I have 2 things. One, I can follow up on the geological concern just anecdotally. I live 1.5 miles from there, from the laundromat, and I have a drilled well, and I ran a off-site test that was $125, so I'm hoping it was exhaustive, and it turned up nothing. But that's 1.5 miles away, so just anecdotally, I don't know, that's all I have. I'm not a geologist at all. I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So
There's real data.
That's real data, though.
One data.
One data point. And I was told that based on how the water flows underground, it can be totally, one area could be slammed, another area could be nothing, irrelevant of your distance. All right. My main concern with this entire emphasis here seems like it's for housing for retirees to downsize, which I completely understand and support. But my main concern with that is that these retirees, of which I believe are probably the majority in town, seem to be boomers, older, who, sorry to be morbid, will eventually pass away in about 20 years or so. And I'm worried that if we're going to build all of these smaller houses or whatever for the retirees, that's a very nearsighted assessment. If they move to those smaller things that we're considering building, freeing up all the larger houses right as they all pass away then in about 10 to 20, 30 years, then what? There's going to be a housing glut of these large houses that people like me will be left to deal with. And we'll have all these vacant rental properties that we just built for all the dying boomers, which is exactly the opposite of what I want for New London. And I feel that those will be then flooded with rentals, making it even worse. So I'm pretty, if you can't tell, vehemently against all of this, except for the last option that we already have, which I support.
But the last option does need work if you want it to be successful. And the future you painted, although it may happen, is not the focus of the group. It's not just on housing for retirees.
No. And I would add to that if you were married and had a child that's 5 years old now, in 15 or 20 years, that child is going to need a place to live. And so if you watch how the demographic ebbs and flows, and I'm one that will be passing along, then hopefully the housing that we leave would be available for younger generations. So there's more coming along. Have more children. Good for you.
Hi, Gene Weber, New London Hall Farm Road. And, I think retirees, people want to downsize. That's one aspect, but I think the big need in the community is the fact that there's so much need for affordability among working class folks, people from the fire department, police, the school teachers, professors at the college, medical providers. A lot of these folks cannot get affordable housing in town. This has come up in some of our citizen committee meetings about the big need for this, and it's really a huge problem for us right now. And I would think that that's the kind of primary thought in my mind about the urgent need we have in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, questions?
Yeah, Peter Hoagland. Given what you know, space, land that you've already worked on, can you give an idea of the build-out you're thinking about? Is there any guesstimate as to what, ADUs and different things?
No, and we did a lot of conversations about what the merit of build-out would be. We did some looking into it, and I don't want to misstate the facts, Zach, so stop me if I say it. But we looked at the fact that there was plenty of land that could be developed if those landowners decided that they wanted that to happen. But we have no way of judging how many developers or individuals may want to create units. So even if we created a build-out, it would probably be like worst case scenario, everything that gets built, which usually just scares the heck out of people. Anything you want to
Yeah, I would add to that. Think of it this way. Build-out analyses are really scary because think of it this way. When zoning was first adopted in the town, if somebody were to sit down and very little of the land was being used, they sat down and said, now what's the maximum build-out for the town? And they looked at every parcel and they assumed that every owner would want to build on an empty lot and that every owner that owned one lot might be willing to sell to the neighbor next door to make a bigger lot that's developer. There's a lot of variables, and the number gets so big because it assumes it all happens at once. And what we know about zoning is, first of all, we recommend that we be proactive in our zoning. The worst kind of zoning you can have is when a developer comes into town and says, I want to build this project, and the town gets up in a furor and says, no, we don't want that, but we have to allow it. And then after that, they say, oh, gee, now we're going to change our zoning to stop that next time. That's reactive zoning. And what we need to do now is to address zoning proactively to allow the natural forces of people who can afford things and want to do things to do it over a period of time. And it's not going to happen. If we were to adopt all of these, it's not going to solve the problem right away. But over time, gradually, in the places where it can be done, and we want it to be done, it will be.
As far as the ADUs go, Pete, we started allowing ADUs in the late 90s, early 2000s. From there to 2015, we don't have great metrics as far as exactly how many of them exist. But when the state law changed the last time in 2015, from then till now, we've started tracking them. And I think over the 10 years, we've had 19 that have been built. As far as the detached ADUs that became allowable as of July 1st of this year, we had one that we've issued a permit for. And interestingly, the permit was already issued to build the structure. The property owner was not going to include a kitchen so that it wasn't an independent dwelling unit. So it was essentially just a detached bedroom and bathroom from their house. And so they came after the law changed to ask for a small kitchenette to be installed. But that's the only detached that we've seen so far.
In a similar vein to Peter's comments about the concern that all of these will create a gigantic boom of development in New London, it's going to certainly take a while. And an example is home conversions that Steve mentioned earlier. The likelihood that a home conversion will happen, there are challenges therein. Is a developer going to want to build 4 more kitchens and 6 more bathrooms? Maybe not. But is it an option? It certainly could be. So, take all of these with a grain of salt, knowing that they're not all going to get developed in the next 10 years.
Other questions, comments? Yes, down in the front.
Hi, Garnet Williams.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. A couple of thoughts. One, and maybe you've already discussed this, but, you know, we would like to attract some younger folks, families to help build our communities. Are our schools ready for the influx if and when it happens? And it may not hit until 5 years down the road, but within those 5 years, we only have X amount of kids, so we start closing schools or closing off this and that, and then all of a sudden, we have more. And when young families come into a community, they're looking at schools. How good are they? And can they accommodate? Can my child get what they need to compete in the big world? Okay, so you've got not just the utilities, the water, the sewer, you've got school, you've got fire, you've got police, you've got all those ancillary things that go along with building a community. Okay, and the other thing is we're all going through and enjoying, I'm saying that kind of tongue in cheek, the fact that costs are going up. And to build, especially, that's going up. So you get a developer to come in here to do anything, convert, build, cluster, what have you. It's going to cost more, and therefore, at the end of the day, affordability is going to be compromised. And so we can do all of these wonderful things, but will we be able ultimately to get to that affordability level that supposedly, based on the incomes that you've talked about, are going to actually be able to even afford that then? Okay? So it's nice to have all these thoughts and everything, but as my husband said, it's only half the picture. Because, first of all, we've got to get a developer, and they want to make money, okay? And then you've got to purchase everything, and that's going up and up and up, and availability is, it's unavailable to use or make. And so when you finally get to the final product, it's not affordable. And it might be just a studio, and it's still going to be beyond the reach.
So back to how we to start to address your question, I think you have a comment. Back to when I started talking, I talked about it as like picturing a pie, and the slices of the pie we have control over are the regulations. We don't have the other slices under our control. So a lot of the things you raise are real concerns. They're things that the Housing Commission's been talking about. But I will tell you that there are communities in New Hampshire that have made regulatory changes, these and others that we were considering at the second forum that we're no longer considering, who are seeing affordable units be built by developers who have the regulations they need.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think of it this way. There are certain levers that we can work to try and get housing to be affordable with a little a, not subsidized rental subsidies, but affordable for the mid-range. And one of them is density. So if you take a property and you can put 10 units on it or in a subdivision, and you allow 12 units if it's a cluster, you're basically discounting the land for those 2 units and making it free. So that helps the cost of those 2 units to be less expensive. The other way you can accommodate is the cost, which is something we can't manage. Builders and developers, they put sticks and bricks together, and that's expensive, is the size of the unit. It costs less to build a smaller unit than it does a larger unit. Now, we've studied modular housing and panelized housing and tilt-up housing and cement-made housing. Some amazing advances going on, and they are bringing the cost down a little bit. But the best I've been able to find is about 25% reduction in the actual cost per square foot that comes from these measures. That does not include concrete. I'm still befuddled by that one. But those are 2 levers that we can work. Education is an issue, and the school system needs to keep an eye on that. Water and sewer is an infrastructure we need to keep an eye on and plan for, but that's part of our economy. Let me talk just quickly about taxes, which is a concern sometimes. And I want to stress the fact that if there's no new construction, if there's no new addition of of economy in the town, then the only thing that the increase in the cost of running the town can do is drive up the tax rate. And that's distributed amongst the same number of houses that we have now. So we need to think, we don't want to build in a crazy fashion just to keep our taxes low, but to add an appropriate number of units to provide housing that we need will help with the tax issue a little bit.
That's why the water issues we're facing right now should be top on the list to get them resolved immediately, because that'll free up those 2 lots.
I'll pass that along to the water precinct.
Speaking to the question about the schools, though, so part of this grant process, Mark Frugier, who couldn't be here tonight, he did do a study where he looked at all different types of development and then what they've resulted in for school-aged children. And due to birth rates going down, other than some folks in the audience perhaps helping us, but it simply has not been an issue. And we did have on the Housing Commission for 5 years was the recently retired superintendent of schools, Winfred Fenneberg, who time and time again, I think Peter can say this too, said we can take the capacity of whatever nominal impact some additional housing will have on the student population, simply because if you have 10 new houses and only 4 of them actually have kids, and now it's only 1.2 kids per family or whatever it works out to be, it just works out to be a pretty small increase in student population. So it has been part of the conversation.
Is there anybody who hasn't had a chance to ask a question tonight that would still like to? Because we're coming up on 7. A few people have left, and some of you are just too polite to leave. So I wanted to give you the option if you want to wrap up here, and we can stick around and take other questions. Or
yeah, if you'd like to stand around and come and talk for a little bit, we're happy to. But I think it's time to close up and to thank you for coming and for your careful consideration. We need your help. You ultimately will be voting, and we need your help to keep this town character and to help the quality of life here, which is why we're all here. Thank you.